You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the old network where we explore all the goings on in the world of crypto derivatives. We'll make a pit stop there in Bitcoin, maybe some ETH, maybe some Solana, and you never know. It's going to make it onto the show. That's why you have to tune in every week. My name, of course, is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com. As well as, of course, from the ever-compelling, at least we tend to think so around these parts, Options Insider Radio Network. I'm pleased to be joined once again on the old program by Mr. Bill himself, Mr. Bill Ulivieri from Cenacle Capital Management, a.k.a. the blockchain advisor, a.k.a. the guy who's bridging the gap between traditional and digital investments. Mr. Bill, welcome back to the Crypto Rundown program, sir.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be back. Always to be with you on the show.
All right, then let's dive right in. It is time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown. It is spooky season. You know, we are recording this here on Halloween, listeners. So let's see if the crypto markets are obliging with a little bit of spooky and or creepy action out there. And actually, it's been pretty much mostly the opposite, except for a wee bit of a sell-off after our last show. On our last show, we were about 19,343. And then we dipped the next day on Tuesday, not down to about 19,273. So not even below 19,000. And then pretty much ever since then has been pretty much straight up, all the way up to the high on Saturday of nearly 21,000, 29.65. Then we dipped back down a little bit. As of showtime now, we're hanging out right around 20,449 when we kicked off the show. So, Mr. Bill, the markets are not playing ball. They're not being spooky. They're actually looking mostly green, sir. What's been lighting up your tape out there in the world of Bitcoin since we chatted last?
Well, adoption continues. I find it interesting that, even though the market, the QQQs, the NASDAQ, S&P, had a lot of selling pressure in this last, season, the kind of before the season earnings announcements. Bitcoin kind of hung in there. Now, it's not quite as high as I would like. I think I'd like to see it above 21,000, 21,500. But for the most part, these cryptocurrencies, for the most part, made their lows in June. And it seems like they're either staying the same or they're eking out slightly higher lows. I find that very interesting. And so I don't know. I kind of think that the spring is being wound. It seems like risk is coming back on into the markets, like T-bills, treasuries. The market in general had a spectacular rally just the other, on I think it was Thursday of last week. So I'm very positive because risk on. Cryptocurrencies are risk on. Bitcoin is risk on. If we're seeing risk on come back into the market and the dollar begin to pull back, I think that's going to be an incredibly positive thing for the crypto space.
There we go. Well, let's see if the rest of our analytics support that thesis. By the way, speaking of analytics, they're coming at you courtesy of our friends over there at Genesis Volatility. GVol.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. New coat of paint over there. They have been recently acquired, our friends at GVol, by Amber Data. So you can check out all of that. There's a link to the press release about it and what that means going forward and what they're planning to do to further improve the service over there. GVol.io is the place to go to begin that journey. And of course, if you went there right now, you'd see that the vol in Bitcoin is pretty much holding firm, which is something it hasn't done in a while. It's been mostly eroding week after week for the better part of the last month and change. And this week, actually getting a little bit of a tick up out there at about a 55.5 when we kicked off the show. That's about 2.5 points higher than it was this time last week. So that's the first bit of stemming of the blood, if you will, out there in terms of vol just has been eroding almost nonstop ever since it spiked back a couple of months ago. And in terms of the skew, we've also been talking for a while. We've seen that put bid mostly eroding. We kept saying, when are we going to finally maybe see maybe a bit of a positive skew again, or at very least a flat skew? And the answer to that is this week, listeners. We're seeing the skew coming at the start of the show is pretty much flat. That's up from about a negative 2.1 on last week's show. What does that mean? That means there's no market bid in either direction for the calls or the puts. So from an options perspective, at least, we're kind of hanging out and shrugging our shoulders saying, we don't know where we're going to go. We're probably going to go somewhere, but there's no bias or terror in one direction right now out there. Historically, Bitcoin was very call heavy. Everyone was just loading up on calls all the time. For the better part of this year, it's been mostly negative skew, which has been kind of interesting. It's also made a lot of strategies we've talked about and products you folks like to trade, like Bito, like, selling puts or the 1x2s out there, that kind of thing. Far more attractive, at least for right now. That skew is looking very flat. And in terms of what's open, what are the size? Well, before we get to the size positions, let's talk about the overall OI first over there on Deribit. And we're seeing October pretty much roll off the board. So as a result, we're seeing OI mostly down. The calls right now, 175,000 open on Deribit, and the puts at about an 89,000. That's down about 3,000 on the puts and about 5,000 on the call. So not a ton of evolution out there. We're still seeing roughly 2-to-1 calls over puts. That's pretty much the level we've been hanging out at for quite some time over there on Deribit. And it seems to be the level, at least for the foreseeable future. Bill, before I break down all the top positions out there, any of that surprise you out there? The fact that we're finally seeing a bit of a tick up in the vol out there in Bitcoin, people have been waiting for a little while. And also the fact that we're finally seeing the skew back to flat. Whether it'll stay there, I don't know. But at least for now, it's back from the heavy put bias we've seen for a while now, Bill.
Yeah, I am surprised, actually, Mark. We had this conversation, I think, last time or at least I was surprised that we never really saw a steep put skew in the S&P 500. The CBOE produces a ticker called skew. I think it's what it's called, SKEW. And it is a relationship between, the call slope and the put slope. And for the most part, it seemed like even despite the volatility we had in the market, the skewiness of the traditional option world really wasn't bid that high. It was kind of surprising to me. So I am surprised that Bitcoin is as flat as it is. And I'm especially with, the halving coming up pretty soon and the stock to flow ratio looking pretty good, risk coming back on. I'm not watching it incredibly close, but I am surprised, like you say. It seems to me that it should be coming back on again. We should see some upside participation in Bitcoin.
Well, let's see what we are seeing out there from a size position perspective. These are the top 5 size positions open right now on Deribit, listeners. And again, we saw October coming off the board, so a bit of evolution out there. Number 5, we have the 30,000 strike with 12,300 contracts open. That's a newcomer to the top 5. So haven't seen that far out of the money really making its way into the top 5 in a while. So maybe that's a sign of what we have in store for us going forward. Maybe, as Bill was saying earlier, maybe some of that optimistic spirit coming back, or maybe it's just a sign of October rolling off the board, and this is what's left behind as a result. Either way, the 30K strike coming in at number 5 with 12,300 contracts. Number 4, we have the 25,000 strike, 13,900 contracts open there. That is literally unchanged on the week, so that's kind of interesting. No big evolution there. Clearly not a lot of October set up there because it hasn't budged. Number 3, the 22,000 strike, 14,800 contracts open there. It's up about 800. Number 2, we have the 19,000 strike. That's where we've been hanging out for a while. 14,800 there as well. So that's down 2,800. So technically, we actually have a tie for the 2/3 spot, both with 14,800 contracts open. And the number 1 size position, obviously a little smaller this week than last week, is the 20,000 strike in Bitcoin. That's also down 2,800 contracts this week. It has about 16,600 contracts open there. Now let's head on out to the land of CME listeners and see what's going on. We actually had a little bit of a pop in terms of volume last week on the big Bitcoin options contract. We talked about that on TWIFO, if you folks had a chance to tune in and check that one out. This is a contract that has languished. If you've been listening to this show, you know it hasn't really done much paper. Since launch, some weeks you do 20 contracts, and we're starting to see a little bit more action out there. In fact, so far today, we've already seen 344 contracts going up in the big Bitcoin options over there at CME, which is a ton for one day. That used to be several weeks worth of paper, including 125 of the 17,000 puts in November have gone up so far today, and 61 of the 21,000 puts. So maybe a bit of a 1x2 put spread out there. Either way, intriguing stuff. And there is some OI on the 21,000 puts. Maybe they're rolling them down. Either way, interesting stuff here, and a fair amount of action. Let's see, in terms of last week, we can go out to there as well. There, 1,200 contracts went up last week as well. So a pretty active week. I mean, again, it's not Euro dollars or anything like that, or the E-mini S&P, but it's for the kind of numbers we've been seeing historically out of this product. That's actually a fair amount. By the way, if you want to sink your teeth directly into all things Bitcoin options and micro Bitcoin and everything else, head on over to CME Group, cmegroup.com/TWIFO, TWIFO. That's the name of our show. That's the name of our show we do with CME every week called This Week in Futures Options. And on those reports, which are available for free over there, you could see exactly what we're talking about, all these numbers for yourselves. Let's head on out to the micro Bitcoin, and also looks like a little bit of a resurgence out there as well. Nearly 600 contracts on the tape today, including 144 of the 20,000 calls going out in about 5 days. Those are fairly active. The micro Bitcoins have struggled a little bit more, and 150 contracts on the tape today. So I think there's a lot of hope and excitement for the micro products when they launched. For whatever reason, they seem to do a little bit of paper, then they kind of hang out for a couple of days and they do a little bit more paper. But the big Bitcoin options doing a little bit more paper out there, which is interesting. And also we have our friend Bito up to about a 1260 when we kicked off the show, up about 70 cents on the week. So a nice little pop for them out there as well. Mr. Bill, anything catching your eye out there, either in the CME products, which I know you've been paying more attention to, even though you don't really trade them yet, or your new favorite product, Bito, sir?
Nothing really standing out so much that's like hitting me in the face, other than this. So, in investment advising, there's always this constant battle between, should I be a passive investor or should I hire a manager to do actively, manage my account? Passive versus active, Ford versus Chevy, right? Mopar versus Ford, Cubs versus the White Sox. It's always this either or, right? It's can never be both or and. What I do find interesting is that while we consider ourselves active managers, I would just like to think that we're more strategically rebalancing our accounts rather than just waiting for a bottom. And I do love when we're preparing a rebalance for our clients now. Okay, and I'm getting to the answer to your question, and that is we have to sell some fixed income and we have to buy equity, and we also, by buying equity, we're buying the Bitcoin products that you and I have discussed, over the past year or so. So it is interesting that I get to buy this stuff down here in the lower end of the range, which I really like. There's nothing really product specific that I find, super, explosively interesting, other than the fact that I do love rebalancing, on this low end of the range, which is sentiment wise, like 2009. There's just some really interesting things going on in the marketplace. None of them are really fundamentally driven. It's just process and procedures.
We're not in a fundamental world anymore, Bill. It's all been hijacked by just about everything else.
I know. Oh my gosh.
That's why it's nice to have earnings season come along, because at least you can sink your teeth into some rational numbers for a change every now and then. Like, look, here's what they expected to make. Here's what they made. Let's digest that. The whims of the macro sometimes. It could take you.
It feels good, right?
It does.
Look at these numbers, but they said like 60% of the companies surprised to the upside, in earnings, which I don't think anybody expected. And I don't know. It's always every day is a challenge, and an exciting challenge. It's what gets us up in the morning.
That it does indeed. As we continue our exploration out into the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, welcome to the altcoin universe, the portion of the show where we explore everything outside of the big dog, which is Bitcoin, except for right now when we break down the top 10 out here. And you know what? It's been a little bit of evolution on the bottom half of our top 10. We'll get to that in a second. Number 10 is Solana, our old friend Solana, holding out at 11.8 billion worth of market cap. You might see, well, that's a new name at the number 10 spot, and you are correct. Number 9, right behind it, we have Cardano hanging out at about 13.8 billion. And then number 8, leaping up from number 10 all the way up to number 8, it's our old friend, Mr. Doge, closing in on 13 cents. We haven't seen a rally like this in Doge since, I don't know, when Musk, when he hosted SNL, got up to, what did it get up, about 70 cents, somewhere in that range. And then outside of that, it's been naught but downside in the land of Doge, except for this week, where it's getting a little bit of a pop up to 17.1 billion. Apparently, a lot of folks think that now that Musk is the twit in chief, he's going to really just open the floodgates to all thing Doge. Either way, nice pop in Doge for all you folks out there looking for a little bit of Doge love out there. Number 7, we got Binance USD, 21.4 billion worth of market cap. Number 6, we got XRP, 22.75 billion. Number 5, USD coin. Once again, we jump up from 6 to 5, up to about 43.4 billion worth of market cap. Number 4, BNB, 52.3 billion. Number 3, it's Tether, 69.4 billion. Number 2, it's ETH, looking a little bit more robust this week, 191 billion worth of market cap. And rounding out the top 10 this week, good old Bitcoin, a little bit bigger this week at 391 billion. But let's get to Mr. ETH out there. Again, we've been hanging out 1,300 level, bouncing around that level for quite some time, listeners. This week, we kind of broke out of it. 1,340 is where we were on the show last week. And then we kind of hung out there on Tuesday. We're still hanging out right around the 1,340 level. Then we started rallying, got to the high of the week on Sunday, 1,634 listeners. That's a level we haven't seen in a little while out there in ETH. And kicking off showtime a little bit back below that, back down to about 1,572, but still up about 230 handles from where we were on the show this time last week. So a nice little pop out there in ETH. And that is reflected in the vol as well. The vol ticking up was about a 64.6 on our show last week and a 76 on the show this week. So ETH vol getting a little bit frothy again, which is interesting. Still not back up to the triple digits level, but a little bit juicier, a little bit frothier than it was this time last week. And certainly it seems like in the direction it's been heading for the last couple of weeks. And in terms of skew, same evolution we're seeing out there in the Bitcoin options, where it was negative last week, about negative 2.6, not a ton, but slightly negative. And coming into this week, completely flat. So once again, we have a little bit of a mixed opinion out there in terms of Bitcoin options, in terms of what the skew is telling us. It's doesn't know where ETH is heading, which is always interesting out there. Mr. Bill, what's been catching your eye out there in the number 2 crypto asset, which is ETH, sir?
I love Ethereum. I love it. I love its mission statement. I love what it's supposed to be, and that is that global operating system where every computer runs exactly as designed. There's no more Android, Apple iOS, Linux, Java, like all these other programming languages. Imagine a world, 7 billion people, 8 billion people, where they're all really running everything on one operating system. Just how incredibly productive that would be. We got through the merge when we went from proof of work to proof of stake. yes, Ethereum hasn't taken off, but again, I still think it's risk on, just like other asset classes. And the low was put in June. The crypto low. The winter is over, June 2022. You heard it here. All these, these tokens are eking out relatively higher highs and higher lows, and I find it really exciting. I think the chart pattern looks good. I love it fundamentally. We were just joking about fundamentals, but I think Ethereum is doesn't move as quickly as other second layer solutions, but Ethereum is still one of the elephants in the room. I think you've got to respect it.
Always respect the elephants, Mr. Bill. Let's get on out to the OI, what's open out there on Deribit right now. And we've been hanging out in this pretty much 4-to-1 range, calls over puts out there in ETH land. And that is still pretty much the case, even though it came in a little bit this week, which is kind of interesting. We have about 3.6 million contracts open on the call front on Deribit this week. That's actually down 100,000 from this time last week. Obviously, again, October kind of taking some of that with it. The puts, though, ticking up. 953,000 puts are open on Deribit right now. It's up 32,000 from this time last week. So we're still pretty close to that 4-to-1. But we did see the puts gain a little ground this week, which is rare. Going out to the size positions, what are the size positions that are open over there on Deribit right now? Number 5, we have the 1800 strike. Got 210,000 contracts open. That is a newcomer to the top 5. And again, the ETH options positions for some time have been far more optimistic, far more out of the money, shall we say, than what we've been seeing in Bitcoin. And that is still reflected here this week. On number 4, we have our most relevant and now in the money strike. We have the 1600 strike. Well, it was in the money briefly. Now, not so much. The 1600 strike, 212,000 contracts open there. It's up about 34,000 contracts from where it was this time last week. Number 3, we go back up to the 3500 strike that has 288,000 contracts open. That's up a whopping 1,000 from this time last week. Number 2, the 4,000 strike, 332,000 contracts open there. It's up about 2,500. And the number 1 size position still in ETH this week, it is the 3,000 strike. 409,000 contracts are open there. That is down actually about 24, almost 25,000 contracts from this time last week. Again, that's been the size position in ETH for some time. A lot of it is in December, but still obviously some of it coming off the board here with October this week as well. Let's get on out to the CME products, see if anything's lighting it up out there on the ETH front. Remember, they just launched the big ETH options not that long ago. If you want to deep dive into all that fun, listeners, go check out the episode of TWIFO we did when they launched with Tim McCourt, who heads up all the crypto products over there at CME. And again, not a ton of paper yet in those big Ether options, but then again, they're 50 ETH. They're enormous. They're not meant for you or I. They're really meant for funds. And we saw about 87 contracts going up last week, which isn't a ton, but then again, it's a heck of a lot more than it was when it started. And certainly if you compare it to the trajectory that Bitcoin options are on, the big ones, that's a little bit faster adoption rate. So hopefully we'll see these big Bitcoin options ramping up a little bit quicker than we've seen the big Bitcoin counterparts over there. And in terms of the micro side, the micro Ether has been an interesting product to watch for quite some time. It trades in these staccato bursts where it did about 11,000 contracts last week. Again, the big dog looks like last week were the 1,500 calls and 1,500 puts. So 1,500 calls going out on the 4th. And then we have the 1,500 puts going out on the 11th. So interesting stuff. Also, 12 half puts were pretty active as well. All of them doing about 500 to 600 contracts each. The 12 half puts are going out. Those are the regular November monthlies. But a lot of 1,500s, again, not surprising. We did blow through that strike. Looks like we got a little bit farther out going out to December. We also saw about 600 and change of the 2,000 calls. So some action there. It's like a 1,500, 2,000 call spread went up about 600 times on Monday. And then again, not much else for the rest of the week. That's kind of the problem that's bedeviling these products is they'll do paper and then they'll sit there for days and do not much. So we saw about 11,000 contracts going up last week. And so far this week, we have about 4,000. So actually a pretty active day today. That obviously be on pace for about a 20,000 contract week if they hold that pace up throughout the rest of the week. The big dog so far today, it is the November 1,500 puts doing 538 contracts. Looks like a 1,500, 15 half put spread went up 538 times. And that is the OI on both of those strikes as well. So it looks like they're probably taking off a put spread that goes out in about 11 days. But that explains why we're seeing so much paper going up so far today. But either way, a pretty active day. If we can keep this action up, that would be nice. So, Mr. Bill, we've added Solana to the show recently as well. I know you're big on ETH and you like your Bitcoin. Where does Solana rate for you, sir, in terms of the altcoin universe?
I like it, Mark. It seems to have a really great following. It's a layer 2 solution to like the speed and transaction, the expense of putting things basically on an Ethereum contract. I would call it a competitor of Ethereum. But I'll tell you what, looking at the chart pattern, looking at how it looks technically, I think you got something here. I really do. I think it's very compelling. I think from a technical standpoint, it's trading around $32.35 per token. Maybe the low again was around in June, maybe 26, 27 a token. I think last month when we chatted, you asked me if there was any token in particular I loved, and I said all of them, right? All of them, because they all seem to really went through this huge washing out. Solana is exactly the same way in that perspective. High was what, 270, 260 a token. Now it's down in the 30s. So, it's had quite a pullback. And again, I think the crypto winter is over. And so I think Solana as a token, the tokenomics, Solana is a reputational issue in terms of layer 2 scaling and competing with Ethereum and high-speed transactions and how things are working. I'm pretty positive on Solana. Not that I'm not going to say I've done a super deep dive, but I'm saying what I know from it, and listening to again dozens of podcasts on crypto. Solana is a name that is respected for their platform and their development, the developer tools. Right, it's got to be easy to develop blockchain solutions. Otherwise, you're just not going to have scalability. You're not going to have that speed and scale that you need. So Solana seems to be solving that problem in terms of development tools and scalability.
You heard it here first from Mr. Bill. Dump your Bitcoin, dump your ETH, all in on Solana. That's what I'm hearing, Bill.
Did not say that.
Maybe I'm reading between the lines a little bit. Just maybe. All right, let's get into the action in Solana. As Mr. Bill mentioned, it is looking pretty strong this week. It was about 28.37 on our show last week, coming in to start today's show. 32.88, up about 4.5 handles from where it was this time last week. That's a nice move. I've been saying for a while here on Solana that it was glued for the better part of the last few months above the 30 handle. Managed to break it when we were on the show last week, of course, below it, down to about a 28, and now rebounding right back up into the low 30s again. That seems to be where Solana likes to hang out lately. Vol-wise, a little bit of a pop out there as well. It's about 73.25 on our last show. Coming in and started today's show, we had about a 79, so a nice tick up on the vol front there as well. The skew evolution, very similar to what we saw out there in Bitcoin and ETH. Not quite all the way to flat, but getting less negative. It was about almost a -3 on the show last week. This week, about a -0.75. So it's still negative, but only ever so slightly. So again, all three of the major cryptos, at least that we watch here on the show, getting markedly less negative from a skew perspective over the course of the past week, which makes sense. We have seen rallies across the board in most of the major crypto assets. OI-wise, now this is interesting. Everyone's talking about the flippening. When's the flippening going to happen with ETH taking over for Bitcoin? We saw a bit of a flippening here in the OI in Solana with October rolling off the board. For a long time, we talked about how this was the one major, you can put major in air quotes out there if you like, crypto that we saw a huge bias to the puts rather than the calls in terms of OI. It was 3-4 to 1 puts over calls. Right now, it has flipped. So the calls have gained 158,000 contracts. They're up to about 410,000 contracts. And the puts have gone the other way, down 136,000 contracts, down to 354. So we are close to 1-to-1, a little bit of a bias to the calls now, actually, in Solana, which is strange. And for as long as we've been tracking it, which again isn't that long, we've only been featuring on the show for a little over a month, but still, it's kind of fascinating to watch the OI make such huge swings out there. So Solana maybe not the outlier it once was, not too long ago when it was so heavily put biased in terms of OI. Now starting to maybe try to at least line up a little bit more with what's going on in ETH and Bitcoin from an OI perspective. Let's look at the top positions, and then we'll get to some of your questions. Also get some of Bill's back of his pocket altcoin. He's always got some fun altcoin he's keeping an eye on. Number 5 in there in terms of Solana, we've got the 35 strike, 54,000 contracts open there. Again, this has been a huge shakeup here with October rolling off the board. So a lot of newcomers this week. The 35 strike is one of them with 54,000 contracts open. Number 4, we have the 25 strike, 55,000 contracts open there as well. That's, again, a newcomer this week. Number 3, the 34 strike with 60,000 contracts open. Again, a newcomer to our top 5 this week. Then number 2, we have a repeat offender, the 40 strike that has 65,000 contracts open. That's up about 17,700 contracts from this time last week. And taking the top spot this week, we have the 32 strike, which is right where we're hanging out, so no surprise there. 133,000 contracts open there. It's up about 38,000 contracts from this time last week. So interesting evolutions. Obviously, Solana a little bit smaller from an OI perspective, so it's easier to see these swings, but still interesting to watch the evolution out there in Solana as we've been tracking it on the show. Mr. Bill, our listeners love it when you come on because you always have some fun, maybe esoteric altcoin that you're keeping an eye on out there. What's lighting up your tape out there in the rest of the altcoin universe this week, sir?
Okay, so I have two tokens that I think are really interesting. The first one is Polymath. The symbol is POLY. Now, Polymath debuted in 2017, and I actually saw them at a Bitcoin conference in Miami back then. And I remember saying to myself, "Oh, this poor guy. I mean, he's trying to bridge the gap between traditional finance and the regulatory abyss into this pure white, the white snow that's never been driven on, like in the world of cryptocurrency." And it just seemed like not a very good idea at the time. But now I realize the genius behind it. Like you listen to Gary Gensler, the SEC chairman. You listen to how everything except Bitcoin is a security. Polymath is really this cryptocurrency. It's a blockchain company designed specifically for things that are considered securities and securities tokens. And it just dawned on me that this world of Bitcoin, the world of blockchain, this whole world of cryptocurrency is going to have to swim in the pool of regulatory compliance. And as much as we don't want it, as much as we hate it, as much it's like kissing your grandmother on the lips at Thanksgiving. It's just this nasty feeling. The truth is, in order for Bitcoin and crypto to survive, we have to be regulated. It's got to be done right. And Polymath, in my opinion, has this first mover adoption because that's the very core of their mission. Maybe the all-time high, I think, is maybe $2.30 a token ish. We have to double check that the all-time high there, but it's trading around 26 cents a token. And I just think that if it's true, what Gensler says, that every crypto is securities, and institutions want to maintain their regulatory compliance, and companies that want to list a token have to be compliant. They're not going to want to necessarily use like an ERC20 token of the Ethereum contract. They're going to use Polymath's specific token, which is they have their own ERC 1400. That's their Ethereum contract. Their communication protocol. Call it their governance token. Call it that way. So every time you want to, if you're a real estate investment trust, you're a Fortune 500 company. I'm not saying that Polymath is the only game in town. I'm just saying they have an interesting history where the foundation of their core business was to be, FINRA compliant and SEC compliant. I find that really interesting in this environment. So I kind of like Polymath fundamentally, and I like the fact that the chart pattern looks really great. Secondly, this one is going to require a little bit of a tin hat, if I could be so bold. And that is the president. There's a senator in Mexico that wanted to make Bitcoin adoption legal, as legal tender, just as El Salvador did. So I'm kind of asking myself, wouldn't it be interesting if everybody's talking about central bank digital currencies? What if Mexico actually put their currency on a blockchain? And I read an article, it just quickly came across my desk, that Coinbase actually offers, it's like Tether, it's like a stable coin, except it's tied to the Mexican peso. Now, wouldn't that be interesting? Since there's so much conversation about the US dollar being at 20-year highs and the euro dollar, British pounds, and Japanese yen, everything else getting trashed. What if these countries begin adopting stable tokens very easily. I mean, like it happens almost overnight, where you have 30 million Coinbase users decide that they want to get out of US dollars and into the Mexican peso, or you have 30 million, Coinbase wallet users want to get out of USD and Tether and into, some other country token. So the concept of blockchain and foreign currencies in a structure, kind of like a stable coin, collaterally backed, open, sort of transparent token, that's really cool to me. Like that really popped out at me last week or about 10 days ago. So those are my two things: Mexican peso / central bank digital currency, like Tether product, and Polymath because of the regulatory, embracing the regulatory framework.
Peso and Polymath. I like it. As we keep on rolling right on into your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
Welcome to the crypto questions. I just realized I got ahead of myself, so really quickly before we do your questions, let's pay off some of the rest of the altcoin out there. XRP kind of treading water this week, 45.4 on the show last week, 45.6 this week, so kind of unched on the week. We mentioned Doge popping nicely. It was 5.9 cents last week, 13 cents when we kicked off the show, so that's a nice little jump, a little over 4.5 cents on the week. Litecoin, 52.5 last week, 54.5 this week, so up exactly at $2 on the week. Cardano, 36 cents last week, 40 cents this week, up about a little over 4 cents. Polkadot, 5.89 last week, 6.69 this week, up about 80 cents. And good old Shiba even feeling a little bit of the love, getting back to one of the decimal points that it had lost slightly on the week. All right, let's get to your crypto questions. Let's go out to this one from Jake. Jake wants to know very simply, are there other Bitcoin ETPs outside of Bito and Grayscale? Well, Grayscale Trust, a little bit different. I'll let Bill fill that in because, of course, he's Mr. Grayscale. He loves it. Bito was kind of the first mover advantage in terms of, an ETF that was really approved and allowed to be traded here in the U.S. So we got all the thunder, but there were some others that came out not that long after it. Actually, the Valkyrie ones are the biggest ones, and I'm trying to remember their. Here we go. So the Valkyrie Bitcoin Strategy ETF is ticker symbol BTF. They also have a Bitcoin miners and others, but the Valkyrie one came out shortly after Bito, and it seems like nobody really cared. It was just all Bito all the time. Bito is doing the volume. Bito got all the headlines. Bito is doing the options paper as well. So there are others, from a liquidity and depth perspective, I think, and also tracking. I haven't looked at the Valkyrie fund and how it's doing from a tracking perspective, so I can't really speak to that. I have looked at Bito, and it has surprised me, as I mentioned before on the show, how well it's doing. I thought it was going to get run over from a roll yield perspective, and that has not been the case, so that's interesting. But others do exist. Valkyrie is the one that really leaps to mind in terms of another one that has been approved and is trading out there, but again, doing less size. Mr. Bill, any others you can think of? Have you played around with these Valkyrie ETFs anymore? Do you have any thoughts on them? And anything else out there outside of Bito and Grayscale when he's talking about things he could put in his securities account?
No, I can't say that I've checked out the Valkyrie because, I'm pretty slow mover, right? Like I find what I like what I like, and I kind of stick with it. So you've, with your help, have moved me to be more open to the Bito products for sure. But I did recently attend a conference for investment advisors, and the company Bitwise was there. And they have what they call the Bitwise Crypto Industry Innovators ETF. That symbol is BITQ. And I find that kind of interesting because it doesn't hold crypto per se, but it holds those companies that are in the cryptocurrency space. Like Coinbase, it has an 11% allocation to Coinbase, 10.89% to MicroStrategies, 9.84% to Silvergate Capital, which is like a bank, Riot Blockchain, mining companies, Marathon Digital, Bakkt Holdings, and the list goes on and on. So some of them are very small, low capitalization companies, but they also hold names that we're pretty familiar with. CME Group, Interactive Brokers, Visa, NVIDIA, Signature Bank, Block. These are all companies, Mark, you and I are already familiar with. And so because with familiarity brings comfort. So you read these names and you're like, hey, this has got, 1.3% of advanced micro devices. Maybe that's Why? Because you need chips to do crypto, right? And while NVIDIA and AMD have gotten hurt from probably some of the, not only just from the technology side, but all of the technologies in asset class, but if the government's going to make Bitcoin mining or cryptocurrency mining an ESG problem, like a green energy problem, then you're not going to have people buying 30 GPUs at one time. You're just going to move back to a business model where you've got a teenager in your basement buying one NVIDIA card for their video game. So that's going to hurt their revenues if you don't have proof of work.
Yeah, it's a fascinating space. I'm just looking in some of these Valkyrie prospectus and things while we're talking here. So I haven't checked in on it in a little while. It's holding the futures like you would see with Bito and some treasuries. So that's pretty much what you come to expect. Again, if for whatever, you don't say why you don't like Bito or Grayscale, I'm going to guess maybe with Grayscale, maybe you're a little bit spooked by what's going on out there with the discount to the NAV out there. So maybe that's freaking you out. As Bill mentioned, there are other ways you can go if you want to go in a securities account. If you want to invest in these crypto names or crypto-related names, there's a legion of those. Obviously, there's Riot and Mara, or you can go the CME route, the exchange. There's a lot of different ways you can go with that. Microsoft, however you want to carve it up. But from the regulated and launched ETF and ETP side, it's pretty much Bito's the big dog, and then you got some Valkyrie hanging out there. And then Bill's favorite, Grayscale, coming in on the trust side. Mr. Bill, that music means we come to the end of another fun sojourn through the world of crypto. But before we go, if folks want to reach out to you, chat with the blockchain advisor himself, where should they go? What should they do?
Well, they can visit our website, cenaclecapital.com, and reach out to us. That's CENACLE, cenaclecapital.com through the website. Or they can go to Spotify and follow us for our podcasts, The Blockchain Advisor. And also, hopefully, I can snag your ear when the book that I'm having published comes out, hopefully in another month or two. It'll be for estate planners and financial professionals and how to recover cryptocurrency assets for their clients. So we've been hibernating a little bit in terms of our podcasts and newsletter, because we've been doing the book, but we hope to come out stronger in 2023. So look for us on Twitter. Just do a Google search and you'll find us. And we would appreciate having a conversation with anybody about blockchain and cryptocurrency, because this is so exciting.
There you go. Check him out over there. Forthcoming author, Mr. Bill himself. We'll definitely have him on when that book is ready to roll out into your hot little hands, listeners. In the meantime, of course, you can give him a follow on Twitter at Cenacle Capital, CENACLE, capital, all one word. And of course, you know where to go to learn more about all the analytics we talked about on the show today. Genesis Volatility, aka GVol.io, is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. That's going to do it for the broadcast network today. Back again tomorrow for all you pro folks with the old pro Q&A session. Mr. Steve Sosnick from Interactive Brokers coming on to answer all of your burning options questions. Then, of course, all the rest of our content all throughout the rest of the week, all the way back to another great crypto rundown.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.